Hi, you're watching Can TV 21. We're with the LGBT hotline. My name is Kevin Sparrow. And we're asking you to hold your calls for a few minutes until we get into our topic. But when you do call in, make sure to call 312-738-1060. And this is Bob Schwartz of the Gay Liberation Network. And today our topic is going to be Stonewall. 2009 marks the 40th anniversary of the historic Stonewall riot in New York City. It's become a cornerstone of the LGBTQ rights movement, and our goal today is just to try to understand Stonewall's significance, both historically and how it impacts our human rights struggle today. So, our first, I guess my first question would be, what was life like in the 60s, pre-Stonewall?
Well, at the top of the show, I'd like to mention that this is the best book on the Stonewall Rebellion. Stonewall, the riots that sparked the gay revolution. The author is David Carter. It was published in 2004, I believe. So if you want to know about Stonewall, we can only say a little bit here on this show, but this is an excellent book. Life was a lot different 40 years ago for LGBT people than it is today. And I can attest to this difference because I was around to experience it. Homosexuality was illegal at that time in every state except Illinois, and that didn't change finally, in a final sense, until a Supreme Court decision of just a few years ago. The medical community, psychiatry, viewed homosexuality as a sickness, as pathology, and that didn't change until 1973. And as today, but it was even more intense in those days, religion denigrated homosexuality as a sin or against a mythical natural order. We're still dealing with that today. As anyone in our community can attest. So a lot of progress has been made in 40 years, and well, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Again, for those of us just tuning in, we're Can TV 21 is featuring the LGBT hotline, and if you have any questions, call 312-738-1060. So back to our topic at hand, Stonewall. What other agitations had happened before that? Were there any other riots or groups forming to secure gay civil rights?
Right. Well, the movement for gay rights or gay liberation did not begin in 1969, but there are reasons why that event there in New York in Greenwich Village was kind of a touchstone for our community. But in Chicago, actually, in 1924, a man named Henry Gerber began an organization known as the Society for Human Rights. It didn't last very long. The police broke it up. They did publish a newsletter for a few months. And interestingly, Henry Gerber lived to see the Stonewall Rebellion, dying at age 80 in 1972. And there was the Madison Society, started in Los Angeles in the early 1950s by Harry Hay and others who were influenced by the Communist Party. But they were forced out by conservative elements who didn't like the confrontational direct action approach of the Madison leadership. And they adopted a sort of a, get along by going along kind of approach. And they actually aped in many ways the medical model of homosexuality being an illness, but they thought that gays should still have equal civil rights, even if maybe our behavior was deviant or aberrant. And then the Madison Society, founded in Washington D.C. by a man by the name of Frank Kameny, who's still living at age 83, took a much more direct approach. And was more like the direct action organization that our own Gay Liberation Network is here in Chicago, and he was frequently seen carrying a sign which was quite forward-looking for its time that said "Gay is good," And Frank Kameny, as I said, is still living at age 83. But a lot of gays had adopted the gay is sick medical model. They didn't feel that good about themselves. They had internalized homophobia, and we're still dealing with this problem today. But it was very widespread in the period prior to Stonewall in 1969.
All right. Well, speaking of Stonewall, for the generation coming up now, I guess it's a buzzword, and we know that Stonewall is important. But what exactly was Stonewall, and who was involved in the actual event?
Well, it was certainly more than the way Stonewall is presented today, as a kind of a corporate dominated celebration with floats by bars and beer companies and other corporations in the parade. It was essentially a riot or a rebellion, as I choose to call it. It went on for 3 days outside a bar called the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York. The first night was June 28th, 1969, and interestingly, the Gay Pride Parade in Chicago and in many other cities this year is on June 28th. So it falls exactly on the 40th anniversary of the beginning of the rebellion at the bar in New York. The bar in New York, the Stonewall Inn, as was the case with other bars in New York and in Chicago and other cities for that matter, was dominated by organized crime. It was a mafia operation. The liquor was watered down. The sanitary conditions were not good. But it did, the mob control of the bar did provide a space where gay people could be themselves, where they could recapture a sense of family and community. Or establish a sense of family and community, because it was very difficult in those days, with most gays being in the closet or hiding their sexual identity. The Stonewall Inn was one place where we could be ourselves. And there were a lot of street kids involved. Just like today, if you go up onto North Halsted Street, there are a lot of street kids, many of them homeless, on the scene up there. This was the case in New York and in Chicago and other large cities, which were a magnet for people getting away from their rural life or small town lives that were, as you can imagine, very difficult for a gay man or a lesbian in 1969, given the conditions that I had described earlier, with the legal and the medical and the religious oppression of people in the gay community. One of the key figures in the disturbance, the police raided the bar, as they would do periodically, and this was so they could establish their credentials as guardians of the moral order and that kind of thing. It usually happened just before elections, when they wanted to prove to the voters that they were cracking down on vice. And they raided the bar, and by most accounts there was a lesbian there who didn't like the idea of being arrested for simply being in a bar, which heterosexual people could do without any problem. And so she put up a fight as the police were trying to haul her off, and then the bystanders, instead of slinking into the night as the police assumed they would do, didn't do that, and they stood there, and there were shouts of gay power, and one of the persons was quoted as saying that everyone in the crowd felt that we were never going to go back. That this was really one of those watershed moments, if you will, sort of a divide of where people were simply not going to take it anymore, and we were going to begin standing up for our rights. That's the key thing, I believe, about Stonewall.
So speaking of standing up for our rights and going towards a more liberated front, what was the Gay Liberation Front, and how did that stem from Stonewall?
Well, the Gay Liberation Front began shortly after the Stonewall Rebellion, and our organization, the Gay Liberation Network, several years ago adopted that name, Gay Liberation Network, in a conscious effort to identify with the earlier Gay Liberation Front. Now, the Gay Liberation Front was not narrowly focused on what has been called, in today's parlance, gay identity politics. In other words, the Gay Liberation Front made an effort to express solidarity with other struggles, such as the women's struggle, the anti-war movement, the struggle for black rights, the civil rights movement for African Americans. And this was noted by people in the other movements. And one of the black leaders, Huey Newton, was very supportive of the struggle for gay rights. And this was unusual at the time. And he said, you know, these people have supported us, meaning the gays have supported us, and we're going to support them. And we think today in the Gay Liberation Network that is a way forward to link up with other people who are in struggle for their rights or in struggle against illegal and immoral wars. Then it was the war in Vietnam. Today it's the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So we consciously identify with the legacy of the Gay Liberation Front.
Are there some other legacies going into or from Stonewall and from the movement that kind of sprang from it that we could learn from today in organizing efforts?
Well, I think one of the main movements or legacies, as you say, was the struggle for African American rights, for black rights. I mean, I was involved in that back in the 60s in Chicago, and with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama. I was involved in that before I was in the struggle for gay rights. I mean, I was very much gay at that time, but I wasn't open about it, and I did identify with the black rights struggle, and I still identify with that struggle today. The struggles are not identical, there are differences, and I think it's a mistake to say that they are identical, that they're the same, because there are obviously differences. But I learned a lot from Martin Luther King. You know, I learned the importance of a mass movement, and he didn't hesitate to put pressure on politicians of all political parties. His demands came first, not the electoral needs of the Democrats. And we in the Gay Liberation Network have tried to carry out that insight of the struggle for black rights.
Reminder that you're watching CAN TV 21. This is the LGBT hotline, and I'm here with Bob Schwartz of the Gay Liberation Network. So please, if you have any questions, call us at 312-738-1060. And again, we're talking about the history of Stonewall. It's coming up to the 40th anniversary. And actually, on June 28th, the Pride Parade will take place on the exact date. So, on June 28th. So, the GLN contingent actually will be gathering at 11 a.m. at Halstead and Barry. That's 3100 North Halstead. So, if anyone wants to help out and be part of the contingent, please come to Barry and Halstead at 11 a.m. And you can also find out more info at LGBTLiberation at AOL.com. So, please find out more about the parade. We'll also be gathering the day before. There will be the Dyke March in Pilsen. So that's on June 27th. So please feel free to come out to that march to help support in a different area of the city if you have never been there before. It's great. That will be at 1 p.m. at Halstead and 18th Street.
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore what Kevin just said about the Dyke March. That march is occurring for the second year, not in the so-called Boys Town community, which is the most readily identifiable gay community in the city, but in Pilsen. in the Latino Chicano community, and this is a conscious effort to identify with lesbians and others, gay men and others who don't live in the Boys Town area, but who do live in the various communities scattered across the city of Chicago. So we think this is an important message that's being made here. That we live in all communities of the city, and it's also an effort to identify with the immigration struggle that people in the Latino community are engaged in, and we in the Gay Liberation Network have supported that, and the Dyke March the Dyke March leaders are also aware of that, and we're honored to be there to support their march.
And if you want to further support any of these rights, and specifically GLN, there's actually going to be a town hall meeting at Center on Halsted on June 22nd. And the Center on Halsted, do you remember?
It's at Waveland and Halsted.
Waveland and Halsted.
Right.
So please join us there. It starts at 7 p.m. And our upcoming show will be July 10th. So feel free, stay tuned to us for then. Remember, CanTV 21 312-738-1060. Call anytime with your questions regarding GLN. And remember, we're talking about Stonewall today. So I guess any final words on what do you think that Stonewall has provided us today, or what can our current generation do to use that kind of momentum, I guess? Even 40 years later, I think it seems so relevant.
Well, yes, the direct action message of Stonewall never goes out of fashion, so to speak. As I mentioned, there was a similar direct action message in the movement for black rights in the civil rights movement. The women's movement conveys a similar message. The labor movement, when it was successful, was not endorsing Democrats like Barack Obama, who then turn against workers and betray them once they're elected. The labor movement, the women's movement, the black rights movement, the gay movement, all of them were built on the basis of direct action tactics. That the way to change society is not to go into a voting booth every 2 years or 4 years and vote for a candidate who doesn't represent your interests to begin with, but it is to take to the streets or to take to the shop floor, to occupy the factories as workers have done, including recently in Chicago, just before Christmas. The workers at the Republic Window and Doors factory occupied the shop floor and won some important demands. This is the way that struggles have been won. And Stonewall, I mean, the message of Stonewall is, I think, the message of direct action. That if you want your rights, you better organize. Get your friends and your allies. People don't have to be gay to enter into struggle for gay rights. Get together with your friends and your allies. Organize yourselves and take to the streets. And I think this is the message, and this is a message that needs to be relearned, or a lesson, I should say, that needs to be relearned. Today, as I mentioned, the Pride Parade on Sunday, June 28th. It's a wonderful event, and there's nothing wrong with having fun, and having a good time. But I think we need to reclaim the struggle message and the struggle lesson of Stonewall. Get organized, let's get serious about our rights.
All right. I've been talking to Bob Schwartz from Gay Liberation Network on CAN-TV Channel 21. If you want to learn more about direct action, you can go to www.gayliberation.net, or you can join us at the next Gay Liberation meeting, which is Wednesday, July 1st at 7 p.m. at the Gerber Hart Library. That's half a block down from the Granville Red Line stop. So thank you for watching us today. It was a great discussion on Stonewall, and we look forward to seeing you again on July 10th.